Good morning. We are now starting the fourth week of classes. By now, you should have experienced how to take the quizzes. It is very important that you not get behind. You need to be logging in. You need to be getting work done. This week is the first critical analysis. When you click on the assignment, it will tell you what it's asking for. Please be sure and do that. I will reopen the quizzes one time this week for the last two quizzes. That's the last time it will happen. If you do not take the quizzes, then that's up to you. If you've taken the quiz and I reopen it, you can try again, and that's fine. Please spend more than a couple of minutes on the quiz. The information is important. As we progress, it's important that if you have not finished your registration, that you get it done ASAP, or you will be dropped out of classes, removed from the rolls, and you lose an entire semester. Getting your work done is important. In this case, today we're talking about, this chapter talks about what's important about ethics and culture when we do research. We always must protect those who are vulnerable. Vulnerable populations are people in prison, children, minorities, cognitively or intellectually impaired persons, the mentally ill, any of those people who may or may not be able to make decisions for themselves. We have to be very careful when we do research that we are aware of all that they need. So keep that in mind as we start thinking about the ethics. And there are a number of key issues in ethics for human subjects. I'm not going to read the slides to you. You can sit down and look at them and then ask questions if you have any. When we do research with individuals or any group, we have to be careful that we're not violating their privacy, that we're doing it ethically, that we don't put names with our research, that the individuals have privacy, that we protect them. Everything that guides our practice is the code of ethics. And the key principles for us, what are our values? The right to self-determination. If somebody doesn't want to be in the study, they have the right to say no. Research has its own particular set of ethics. You can go to the NASW Code of Ethics and it'll have information there. You have to protect the people you do research with. Here are the examples that have led to this very strict design. Early on, even in Nazi Germany, the concentration camps, they did research on people because they were prisoners. As abhorrent to us as it seems now, that's what led to making laws first to protect people in research. Then we can fast forward to the Tuskegee experiment. If you do not know what that is, you need to go read about the Tuskegee experiment, because what happened is, over a very long period of time, with the assistance of the faculty at Tuskegee Institute, they examined what happened to men who were infected with syphilis. They did not infect those men with syphilis. That's a myth. But what did happen was they had these men that were infected with syphilis and they lied to them. They told them they were giving them medicine, but they were not. And then they just waited to see what would happen to them. And syphilis at stage 3 is incredibly debilitating. And then we have experiments like the Milgram experiments, where they were shocking people. Now, nobody actually got shocked, but it was very traumatic to the person who was being told by somebody in a white coat, just keep going. All of these things add up to, we have to have permission. We have to have things in place. Jarvis has what's called an IRB. an institutional review board that looks at any piece of research that people want to do on the property. So as we look through, people have to volunteer. Now, you will be asked to do some kinds of research that you don't have to have permission from the people, because your supervisor asks you to go through and look at all these cases. That information is not going to be given to anybody. So your rules of confidentiality just about case folders apply. No names are given in those. So you may do the statistics on 80 kids. No one kid is named. No particular group is identified. But it does happen. You have to be honest. There is a lot of temptation when you do research to make the research say what you want it to say or what people want you to want it to say. So if you're being paid for your research, interestingly enough, 80% of all research shows exactly what the person was looking for. We have to be more careful than that. We have an extreme responsibility to protect people and to tell the truth. So if I want to get the grant money and I make up stuff, I might get the grant, but I violated my ethics. And when I get caught, if it's federal money, I go to jail. Really important that we keep up with our ethics. So we have to have respect. We have to allow the right to self-determination. And then here's the big one. We have to give them informed consent. Children under the age of 18 cannot give informed consent. A parent has to sign off. Anybody who is in prison must be given a chance to have informed consent. People who are intellectually impaired may or may not be able to give informed consent. People in a psychiatric facility have the same issue. In each of these cases, we have to be careful that we allow them the right to agree to be in the study, and then we have to allow them at any time they choose to leave the study. So all of these things are important key issues that we have to deal with. And the right to privacy. If just because I'm doing, for example, each of you has a record at Jarvis, not that kind of record, that has your GPA, your transcripts, information about you. If I don't have in front of me that you have signed a FERPA waiver allowing me to speak to parents, whoever, if they call me, I am not allowed to tell them anything. Technically, I'm not even allowed to confirm that you're one of my students. It happens a lot across campus. A parent will call up, how's my daughter doing? How's my son doing? And the answer is, I'm afraid I can't tell you that. I can't discuss any student's needs. This is especially true when you get out in the field in social work. You cannot talk about your clients in that fashion. So even at Jarvis, we protect your information. Not just anybody can see your records. You have to have special permissions to get into the areas of Zanzibar where I can call up your schedule and your personal information. And that's federal law as well. And remember, when you violate federal law on these kinds of things, the people that come to investigate are the Federal Bureau of Investigation. When we do things, work with people, and try to protect people, what we want to do is make sure that we're providing justice. Here's one of the issues that's going on today. People do what they are calling research to find out what's really going on with Black Lives Matter. But they're doing what they think is going on, and they're not interviewing people, they're not going and checking, they're not asking, and so it's not good research. And just because there's some statistics doesn't mean it's good research either. We have to be careful that we don't make assumptions about people that can get them hurt. We can't make accusations, or we can't say, well, you know, most of the people at a Black Lives rally are just there to loot and burn things, and that's being said all the time. The truth is, very few of the people that are involved with the Black Lives movement do those kinds of things. They're loud, it's important, they want to speak out, that's their right. What they've discovered, for instance, on video is finding white people, like men, putting on blackface, putting a hoodie over their head, and causing damage just so people will blame Black Lives Matter. The other issue here is every time something like this happens, there are what are called opportunists. There are people in this world of all nationalities that'll take advantage of any situation for their own gain. If you're going to do good research, you have to go look at multiple sources. When you vote this year, you have to go look at multiple sources to see who is the best person to help this country, to make sure that the most people get the most assistance they can. So when we do research, whether it's personal research or whatever it is, we cannot take and make assumptions just because we think it ought to be that way. As we continue to help you understand what we want in social work, we always have to bring you back to the ethics. We always have to bring you back to the right to self-determination, and that every person's an individual. Also in research, we have to add in cultural competence. They have discovered over the years that a number of the IQ tests, for instance, favored Caucasian people or people of Western European descent because that's the majority. And what they discovered in the 70s, beginning in the 70s, was that these IQ tests weren't fair to minority people. They were asking questions about farmland, for example, and a kid growing up in Harlem in the 60s has never seen a field of wheat, wouldn't know what it was. So there is a certain cultural bias that goes with that. Over time, they have examined and tried to change some of that. Erickson, that we use all the time, is another example of when that first started, it was applied to primarily white people, children growing up. We have to, even using Erickson, account for what happens if, and it doesn't have to be race, what happens if a child is growing up in severe poverty? How do they move through trust versus mistrust and those sorts of stages? And do they do it differently? The answer is yes, they do. There is also this difference. A city kid compared to a country kid. When you live out on the farm, there may be a lot less information flowing back and forth, but your experiences with nature are another way to learn those things. So each thing that we use, we have to pay attention to culture, diversity, and difference in order to deal with that. NASW has 10 standards to deal with cultural competence. That's you. That's learning about other cultures. That's being sensitive that other people may not believe the way you do, and they may have different needs. So it's really important that we take care of those things. Now, here's what happens when you do this sort of cultural competence with research. When you do an explanatory study, let's say you're trying to explain why they're rioting at a Black Lives Matter march, okay? You have to account for, okay, why are the people so angry? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the people that are actually involved in this? What are outside influences? And also, different cultures respond in different ways based on past experience, past events. All of these you have to take into consideration. If you're doing research on how much people make, how come women are paid less? You can't just say, here's how much people make. We have statistics right now for unemployment. How many of those people are women? Specifically, single mothers. How many of those people are people of color? The big one is, how many of those people just work minimum wage jobs? And the money they get from the government right now during the pandemic is more than they can make if they're doing their job for minimum wage. All of these things you have to be sensitive to. So it's diversity and difference, disabilities, gender determination of LGBTQ issues, as well as race, as well as religion. All of these things you have to be sensitive to. There are some religious groups that don't allow people to be in certain kinds of experiments or any kind of research at all. There are certain religious groups that don't allow for blood transfusions. Jehovah's Witnesses are one of those groups. In each case, you have to be sensitive to the people that you're doing the research on in order to protect them. Now, here are the things always to be aware of. Whoever you're doing research on, you want to know from them their beliefs about certain things, especially those things you're asking questions about. You also want to be absolutely sure you are speaking the same language. Please remember, Spanish in Mexico is not the same as Spanish in South Texas, is not the same as Spanish in the Dominican Republic, is not the same as Spanish in Puerto Rico. Each version of Spanish is regional or by a country. And sometimes people speaking the same language can't communicate. So do not make assumptions. If there are going to be people in your study that don't speak English, you must produce the study and questions or whatever you're doing in Spanish, a Spanish they understand. If you're working with certain patients in healthcare, you have to understand, depending on where they're from, rural versus city, they may not trust doctors. All of these things you have to have as part of your strategy. You have to be aware of it. Always be aware. Always gather information that is unbiased. And here's one of the big things. You have to examine yourself first. What's my bias in this? Why am I doing this research? Well, my supervisor told me to. Okay. Does it seem like your supervisor wants a specific answer? That's a bias. It may not be that way, but it's something to keep an eye on. All of this information is available in the PowerPoints. It is important that you go read those PowerPoints to answer the quizzes and to do the work for this course. As soon as I can upload this into the system, this will be available to students, and you can review it and look at it. Thank you.